Let's have a chat about oil pumps. So oil pump on a Rover V8 up until the serpentine belt, and even then I think it might have still been. They're external. They're on the front of the timing cover, so you just have to undo the little 8mm bolts, and you can knock the pump cover off and then access the pump gears, which sit on the inside of the timing cover. So there's the timing cover, water pump at the top, timing cover, distributor drive goes through and drives the oil pump at the same time. So there's a couple of tricks you need to do on these things when they come apart, and bear in mind this is relatively high mileage. I'll tell you what, very nice in there. So the first thing I would look at on these things is the gears themselves. So these are the two gears, there's a gear and a slave. And you can see on these things there are signs of wear, which is not really surprising, really, is it? Because I've never had this thing apart. Never done the oil pump on this. This is factory, as far as I'm aware, oil pump. So the two gears go in like that, and as the distributor turns, then it turns the oil pump as well. So there's a couple of things we need to check on this. We need to check the end float across the top here. Because what we're looking for really is to make sure that when the gasket is in place, there's just enough room in there for these to spin without too many problems. We don't want these dragging, because what will end up happening is it will just tear the tooth off the end, and then you'll have no oil pump, which is not a great idea, is it? So there is a gasket that goes in here. I haven't finished cleaning all this crap off yet. You can see there's some little bits up here. I normally go over it just with some very, very fine emery paper at the end, just to make sure that everything is out of the way. Now, on the other side of the oil pump sits this fella here. And the oil filter goes on to this nodge down here. This has got the adapter for the oil cooler, which is standard on the Range Rover, 1993 Range Rover anyway. Then inside the cover, there's a pressure release valve, which goes in there, and the idea is when the pressure gets to a certain level, it will relieve the pressure, so you've not got too high an oil pressure on this thing. Now, these things generally run, these Rover V8s, I'm not unsurprised to see them running at about 10 psi. It's not necessarily that healthy. Oil flow is more healthy than oil pressure anyway. But 10 psi idle, but as long as they're kind of 30 to 40 at 2 to 3,000 RPM, they're generally they're okay. Now this particular car, has suddenly started taking its sweet time with the oil pressure light. So on a cold start, the oil pressure light can take 5, maybe 6 seconds to go off. It used to go off within 1. So while it's all apart, I might as well renew the internal components of the oil pump. So I've got new gears coming, and I'll check the tolerance on these in a second. I've got a new pressure release valve. Now this is the pressure release valve. I've got a good big spring on the end of it, and it's just a plunger. And the plunger goes in through that hole there, and it goes down through this channel here. And really, it doesn't go very, very far. That's as far as it goes. But you can see the amount of pressure you got on that spring there. There's quite a lot of stuff there going on. Now, one of the things they want you to check is that there's any side-to-side play on this. And I've done that with a couple of screwdrivers. See if there's wiggles side-to-side, and it doesn't. It's also a bit of a beast to get out. You've got to bang it on the bench a couple of times before it moves, which is good news because it's not sticky. It does move. And once it's started to move, you pretty much shake it out. There he is. So I can't actually see anything wrong with the oil pump because I've checked the end float and the end float's fine. The oil pump or the cover, I'm just going to replace the components. Now on the inside face here, when I've excessively warm pump, I've seen all of this machined face disappear where the gears turn and rotate. And it's normally dirty oil that does that, because it's crap in the oil that causes these things to wear. However, because I've looked after this motor, it seems to be okay. So we'll lob it back together again. I'm not especially fussed about this thing. I think it's going to be all right. And then these timing gears, these oil pump gears inside the timing cover, like I say, they're the only real thing that's showing signs of wear. You can see scratches on the edge of the teeth there. It's just showing it's worn. And there's minor contaminants in the oil that have caused those scratches. But after 194,500 miles, are you really surprised that it's a little bit worn? Yeah, so that's that. The other thing that you need to check on, by the way, is the spring. This is the pressure relief spring. And really, you don't want to see too much rubbing on these things. And this one has got signs of rubbing. You can see where it's been rubbing against the side here, against the side of the chamber, and eventually it will rub through the spring and the spring will collapse. So I just replaced that as a matter of course. It will get replaced. Cylinder head. We've got all the bits to reassemble. I've been up to the 4x4 shop, local supplier. They got the valve stem seals, which was the only thing I was really missing in order to get these things back together. But I thought I'd go over the process of reassembling an aged cylinder head. So first and foremost, be aware of what's the front and what's the back, because that'll dictate which is the front valve and which is the back valve. That's the back of the cylinder head. I know, because it's got those bits on the back, and that's the front. Okay, this is the left-hand head when you're facing the engine. Okay, this is the one that hadn't blown. As you can see, very, very, very light skim on the cylinder head surface. No real dramas. I've been over this with a cloth, which is why there's all little bits of fucking blue paper everywhere. Bastard, fuck off. Right, little valves are exhaust. You can see shove my finger in through the exhaust port, and there it is. So the little valves are exhaust, the big valves are inlet. Some of these inlets, no, sorry, that's an exhaust there, which is why it's dirty. Generally, the inlet is cleaner. The exhaust valves on these, though, for the mileage the engine's done, are not bad at all, and that's probably something to do with the fact that I run it on LPG the majority of the time. It doesn't see petrol very often. In fact, most it's seen petrol is just before I did this job, when I blew the inlet manifold apart, not inlet manifold apart, the inlet pipe apart. So we need to grind the valves in. We need to clean the valves. In order to grind the valves in, you need to be able to stick something on the end of the valve, and these valves are not bad actually. I've done the other side. Unfortunately, that's typical kind of carbon build-up that occurs on the valves because of the heat and the fuel that's sitting in the inlet. Really shouldn't be there, but on, you know, again, this sort of mileage, I'm not surprised. That's all going to come off. So all these valves need to be done. So what I'll do is I will start by tidying the valves up, and then we will bed the valves into the head, and then we'll invert the head and we'll fit the valves. How about that? 3-stage process. If I was putting brand spanking new valves into brand spanking new seats, then it would just be a case of grinding them in. I wouldn't need to clean the valves up, of course, but all these valves, there's nothing really wrong with them. They're ancient and there's some pitting on the face, but nothing that's going to affect compression, a low compression engine. It's not particularly high performance, this thing, but it's good enough. Right, so let's crack on. Right, valves. It's gone 6 o'clock. I'm on my own time. I'm having a beer. Today's offering is Tribute Cornish Pale Ale, a fine brew, delicate on the old palate. Right, cleaning these valves up. Sorry, big old sniff there. It's not very nice, was it? I know that all the valve stems are good, and I know the valve guides are good. So all I really need to do is just chip off, really clean up the face here. But if there's any excessive build-up on the back, I'll clean that off as well. This one isn't too bad. The easiest way of doing this, believe it or not, is to mount it in a drill. If you have a lathe, mount it in the lathe, and then you can actually spin. How about that? So then I mount the drill in a vise. It's not gone in tight, don't worry. And running it nice and slowly. Obviously the drill is moving away from you, so if this knife was to break, then it's going to go that way. see quite a big carbon build-up on here. It's not unusual. Now there's nothing particularly nasty on that, so what I'm going to do next is just put a bit of, I've got some emery paper here. This stuff is fucking useless because it dissolves in water, but it's good for this. And there we have one cleaned up valve. The suction cup will go onto, ready for it to go in, into the cylinder. There you go, cylinder head. Right, let's do this one next. This one's going to need a bit on the other side, so I'm going to do the other side first of all because it's just a huge, great glob of carbon on the back there. So again, this is quite brittle, so I'm just going to use please be aware I'm not using this anywhere near anything that's going to, machined face. Right, let's clean the worst of the carbon off. Let's do the face now. Right, let's clean the worst of the crap off there. Okay. The edge of the valve has quite a big carbon buildup around it as well, so I'm going to do that with the knife on the knife, just to use it as a scraper rather than anything else. I don't want to damage the edge of the valve. So just do that. Which way are we going? We're going that way. Well, it's tidied all that up. So that was easy. Right, now. This sort of loose carbon, you saw that big lump just fly off there. It's a fucking huge great lump. It's the sort of thing you really don't want in your combustion chamber. Right, and a bit of this. Might need a bit more on that actually. You can hear from the vibration there's actually something burnt into the face on that. That's got it actually. And then polish it. I'll do that. Number 2 done. That's good enough. There's enough thickness on it. There's enough meat left on it. There's no wear to the guide. You can see the wear to the guide. Those marks you can see down at this end. You can see wear to the guide, but it's not significant. Most of that wear is at the valve seal at the top, or very, very little wear where it goes through the guide. Right, I'm going to get on with the rest of these and I'm going to come back to you when I've done this lot and then we can talk about grinding them in. Right, let's grind some of these valves in now. So what I do to grind the valve in, move all the other shit out of the way first of all, so we don't need any of this stuff here. So all these valves now looking beautiful. Worst of the carbon deposits off, check the valve over, happy with it. Needs to use, and there's a couple of different ways you can do this. You can either do it with the hand stick, so people who use these, you put the valve on and you rub it between your hands like that. That's all well and good. Or you can have one of these. It's a Gunson valve lapper, and this goes into the drill. Like that. And when you, it creates a lapping motion when you actually pull the trigger there. So start with number 7. I'll do number 7. I'll talk to you about what you want to look for when you're lapping valves, and then I will crack on with it. So 2 different types of valve grinding paste. This particular tub here I've had for about 55,000 years. We've got coarse paste on that end and fine paste on that end. So let's just have a quick look at the valve seat, and it looks, as I would expect from an exhaust valve, pretty shit. So all I do is run the inside of the valve around. I don't want tons of it on there, but I just want it on the seat. And the seat is the angled edge on the top of the valve. So when I push the valve in, sorry, I just want to lube up the stem a little bit. There we are, because this head's been washed. Right, so the seat, the bit that I'm grinding, is the bit that sits between the valve and the cylinder head itself. Okay? So, probably a little bit of oil on this as well. That'll do. That should help it to sucker on. And then we put that on there. It's on. You don't want to put any real weight on this. You want it to grind itself, but you don't want it to go nuts. Too much liquid on there now. Typical, isn't it? Now the valve's not spinning at the drill speed. The valve's spinning much, much slower. So I can hold this thing. It's vibrating it. It's vibrating it backwards and forwards. Right. Now, that's come out of there. Now, bearing in mind, that's like quite a coarse grind. What we're looking for is a nice wide band around the seat area. And there is a nice wide band there, which indicates that the valve is not deformed and that the seat is still at the correct angle for the valve. Otherwise, what you need to do is go back to the machine shop and say, can you grind me valve seats, please? And they need to be ground at a specific angle. So that band there, that's the amount of metal that will close up when this valve closes. Now, this valve here, it's an exhaust valve, so these always run a bit hotter. You can see that this thing here around the edge, you can see lines around it and pitting on it. It's not the best valve in the world. I've seen far, far better. But the compression on this cylinder, I know, because we did it before, see episode 1, was 160. So I'm happy with that. So I've cleaned all the coarse off, and I'm going to put some fine on there now and see if I can just polish this surface a tiny bit. I don't want to go nuts on it, but I do want it to seat and not cause me problems. Right. Right. Let's see what that's done. You can see how this might be a ball's ache if you're doing it by hand. Right, so where we are now, all the lines have gone. There's still some very, very light pitting. I don't think it's even pitting. I think it's actually just marks on the surface, heat stain on the surface of the valve seat. I certainly can't fit it with a thumbnail. That one I can, just there. Let's give them another little go. Being careful not to get this shit on the valve stem, by the way. This is only on the valve seat. Right, let's try that. You put this stuff on the valve stem, then it will A, be a ball's ache to clean out, and B, will just wear the machine part of the stem and the valve. And you don't want that. That's not what we're trying to do here. Get the glove off. No, I can't feel them with my finger. So a bare finger on there. And if your fingernail can pick it up, then it's too big. So an exhaust valve seat is always going to be more worn and run hotter than a inlet valve seat, which is what we're doing next. So let's have a look at the inlet valve. So that exhaust valve there, you can see the band around the outside. It's not beautiful, but it'll do the job. I mean, new compression was good on this cylinder beforehand. It's well worn, but serviceable. If you want to make it like it's a brand new engine, buy new valves, get new valve seats put in. New valve guides as well, but there's nothing wrong with any of these. Now, on this one, this is one that I've not ground yet. You can see here, the shiny part is where it's mated with the seat, and you can see it goes wide and it goes thin, and there's also a load of carbon on it. You can see it coming off of my fingernail, possibly as a result of some of that shit that I was doing with the drill, cleaning the valves up. So let me, I'm just going to do this one fine to start off with, because I've got a feeling that the inlet valves are generally a little bit better. They're easier on an engine. So I put oil on the stem just to slow down the rate of wear. I can see when the valve stops turning, so that's why I lift it and just bed it back down again. When the valve's not turning, then it's not actually grinding anything, is it? Right, let's see what that looks like. Right, so much nicer. No pitting on inlet valves. You very rarely get pitting on inlet valves unless the valve clearances have not been set properly, and the inlet valve is then open on the combustion stroke. But here you can see. Can you see? You can. It's in focus now. You can see that that's actually quite nice. There's a little bit on the outside edge, on the bottom edge, near the flat edge. That's not brilliant, but it'll do. More than serviceable. And as far as the seat's concerned, yes, happy enough with that. That's good. Right, I'm going to crack on with the rest of these, put my radio back on. In fact, what we can do is we can do a comparison here. This is okay. That's the exhaust valve seat that I've recut. That's one that I've not done yet. Can you see the silver or grey ring on that one, the mating face? That one doesn't exist. And this was a good cylinder as far as all four of these were 160. They're all either 150 or 160. I'll have to look through the paperwork again. And generally, you find inlet valves are not in bad shape. Exhaust valves deal with a lot higher temperatures, especially with things like unleaded fuel and stuff like that. Burns much hotter than leaded fuel. There's no lubrication in it, so it tends to chew up exhaust valve seats. But that one certainly is you know, I can work with that. That's beautiful. That one. Well, let's stay recording. Let's see what we can do with a really quite nasty looking exhaust, because that's by far the worst of all of these 4 exhaust seats. Right, if I'm going to perform to the camera, I need to just have a quick lug of. This video is not sponsored by Cornish Pale Ale Tribute. However, if the St Austell Brewery fancy sponsoring me, I'm up for it. Right, so here's the valve. And again, on the valve here, you can see there's quite a lot of pitting around. Sorry, you can't see that because I'm not pointing at it. Quite a lot of pitting around the edges of the valve seat here. So we'll start with the coarse. I'm not going to fuck around with the fine to start with. This needs a coarse paste, and the coarse paste is very coarse. So just want it literally on the seat, but don't want it all over the bottom of the valve. So that's what I'm scraping back into the can again. Right, that's the seat largely covered. In we go. Oh, forgot to lube. Just using a bit of that to lube. Just a 3-in-1. It will do. It's just enough to lube the valve in the guide. It's not running long enough that it's going to overheat, but I do want it to stay in good shape. Just put my glove back on. I took it off with my fingernail, didn't I? There we go. Right. Ready? Oh, it sounds nasty. the old-fashioned way, shall we? I'll show you what the old-fashioned way is like. So first of all, let's see what that looks like so far. It's working on it. Actually, it's done it. You can see already there's a grey ring around the edge there. So it's actually cut that already. So it was a very, very, very light carbon kind of burn build-up on the valve seat. There's nothing actually wrong with the valve mate, which I wouldn't have thought there would be because the compression ratio was pretty good. What we'll do is I'll do a fine paste grind on this valve, and I'll show you with the twiddle stick. You'll understand why when you've got 16 of these bastards to do, you get a bloody drill version. Right, just put some. I've got the paste all the way around the outside. That's good. You can go back in there. Get down there, you bastard. Right, bit of a lube on there, and on he goes. Oh, that was a fail already. Is this not going to work? Might be that this thing's too old, but basically what you do is you do that. Well, I want it to, there we are, it's starting to, right, no, it's not going to stay on. I think there's some holes in my rubber, like that, hear it? And when it stops making the noise, you hear it get quieter. As it gets quieter, you know it's done its job. No, it's done it. I ain't going to go much more than that. Right, let's see what it's done. So that was a coarse grind and then a fine grind. Just wiping any of the grinding paste out of there. You don't want to leave this shit in the engine when you assemble it. Right, so first and foremost, let's look at the valve itself. You can see there's lots of marks on it. Most of it is staining. Run your finger around it. If you can feel a big pit or a big notch in it, then it's fucked. Get another valve. That one's all right. And then on the inlet, on the valve seat itself, you can see now, you can see a very clear and distinct ring, which you couldn't see before. I'm happy enough with that. That'll work. That's probably the worst side of that valve. You can see there's a staining on it. It's got this far. It can last a bit longer. Right, I shall get on and lap the rest of these in, and I'm going to come back to you when I start to assemble. Right, putting the valve stem oil seal. So that's a valve stem oil seal. Remember these bastards when I was putting them off. There's a little spring that goes around the top of it. What I generally do is take the spring off first of all to save it flying, because these things are a bit of an interference fit, but they don't need a press, they just need a rubber mallet. So I take all the springs off, position them roughly in the right sort of place, get me stand so they're steady. Can you still see? You can still see. All the springs are off, and then just bang him down until he's on. They're on. Right, then we just stretch the little spring back over the top of the valve stem, sorry, the valve seal. He's on. So that's valve seals. These things stop the oil from the combustion chamber, sorry, from the top, from the rocket chamber, dribbling down into the combustion chamber. Certainly on the inlet valve, you don't want to be sucking oil through because it just blows it straight out the exhaust. When you got the old suck, squeeze, bang, blow, you'd be impressed how much suck there is on the suck stroke. So, right, bung the valve back in. I'll get myself organised here. So I've got here my box of odds and sods. Let's move this down here so you can fucking see what the fuck is fucking going fucking on. So this is the exhaust valve to start off with. So I've got my exhaust valve spring here. and its seat. So there's the valve spring, there's the valve seat. The collets go inside the seat. The valve looks like that, as you well know. You've been looking at it all day. Sorry. Right, next thing I do is I find my oily bird. There he is. I just put a little bit of oil on the stem, but I do this over the top of a little container, so otherwise I just end up making a huge mess on my bench. But really just putting a little bit of oil on the stem. Feed the valve in from underneath. Push him up, there he is. He holds in place now on that valve seal. I make sure the spring's still in place. Put the spring and its cap over the top. The trusty valve spring compressor. Position him over. There we go. Right, so the foot is on the valve and the head is on the top. Two hands. Hang on a second. Right. Make sure that the top part is held centrally, because otherwise, has this done up? Oh, I might have done it up on the last one I did. Just wound it off a turn. Right. Now let's pull the valve down. Next thing we're looking for is a pair of collets. Now these little collets are just little wedges. That's all they are, and they sit underneath on the top of the valve here. They sit like that underneath the top of the valve. So what you need to do is position things and drop the little mites in. It's going to need tightening up. Just tighten up the bottom. Untightened it, that's no fucking good, is it? I'm tightening him up now. That was a cock up. Might have to edit that out. We don't cock up. No, we cock up all the time. Right, it's gone down a fair way, but sometimes what I do is a wood chisel here, and I just tap with a rubber mallet, and it's gone in. No huge bang. Nothing dramatic. Now, when I undo the valve spring compressor by pulling on the lever at the bottom, it will now trap that valve, except I've got the fucking, there we are, that's now in. That valve is now seated. And it's as easy as that. It really is. 7 more to go. I shan't bore you.